This is Centrist Offense. I was going to go over a few takes today. It is May 17th, 2019. If you've been on social media or been paying attention online or watching the news, you know that abortion has been a hot button topic lately. It's been getting hotter. And the reason for that is because Alabama has recently introduced a bill that would completely ban a woman's right to have the procedure throughout the state. And they know that that's unconstitutional, and they're betting on that it's going to get appealed, and I mean, with the hopes of it going through the appeals process, getting to the Supreme Court, and considering Donald Trump was able to appoint 2 conservative judges to the bench recently, you know, they're betting on the conservative judges overturning Roe versus Wade, banning abortion on the federal level. I don't necessarily think this is going to happen. My reason for believing this is because the Republicans use abortion as a tool to rally the troops, you know, to the polls. It's their biggest wedge issue that they have, because abortion is such a divisive issue that really sends people out to the polls. I think that the Supreme Court knows this, and even though they're supposed to be impartial, they know that if they were to overthrow Roe versus Wade, they would basically be hitting the ball back into the court of the Democrats and getting them riled up right for 2020. I don't think that that's something that they want the risk. Not to mention the huge shit show that would happen if they did. People would be rioting in the streets. It wouldn't look good for 2020, and I don't think it's a path that the Republicans want to go down. You might be saying, well, I thought, you know, the Supreme Court was above being partisan. And that's just not true anymore. It hasn't been true for a while. As much as the Republicans stuck their neck out for Kavanaugh, I'm pretty sure that, you know, the Republicans can whisper into his ear. And on the federal level, I don't think Mitch McConnell wants to ban abortions. I don't think it's smart strategically. You know, the Republicans have been using abortion, you know, ever since Roe versus Wade as a wedge issue. It's their biggest wedge issue from a party that's composed of wedge issues. I mean, this is their biggest one. It's, you know, it's the one that drives out the most people and gets them the most animated. It's a big tool for the Republican Party. And if they could just keep throwing these tools a bone, throw them a bone on the state level in their respective states, and keep them pacified, they're wanting to drag that out for as long as possible. And they don't want to do anything to lose that constituency. Also, you know, I don't think that the Republicans that are in it for the financial deregulation side of the Conservative Party, I don't think that the people that are interested in the tax cuts, Mitch McConnell, I don't think that these people are genuine in their stance against abortion. I think that they're just using it as a wedge issue because it's a smart move. It wins. I don't even think that the Supreme Court will even see the case. And the only way they will is if they get strong-armed to take it, because they can't wiggle out of it politically. And when that happens, if they do have to see the case, what I think would happen is one of the conservative members on the Supreme Court would fall on the sword, vote to keep Roe as it stands, and just to keep the game going. You see what I'm saying? That would basically restart the entire game. You have 2 more generations of distracted constituents that the Republican Party can farm for votes. And going back to how I said the Republicans aren't in the abortion fight for the right reasons, I mean, I don't think they want to get rid of abortion, especially for rich people, because it's all fun and games until Mitch McConnell's daughter gets knocked up by Tyrone. And then all bets are off, you know what I mean? And that gets me to my next point about when the Republicans do chip away at Roe versus Wade on the state level, it disproportionately burdens poorer women. The rich women, you know, they could take that time off. You know, they have it easier. They have an easier ability to get that procedure, which I think is built into the cake here. I mean, there's a reason why that rich people are still able to get abortion fairly easily in this country compared to someone who's poor, and that's the point. So no, I don't think Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned, not by the Supreme Court. So the next topic I wanted to get into here on Centrist Offense is the topic of centrism. A topic, or a word, the word centrism has a bad rap. It makes people wince. A lot of people don't like centrists, or they think that they're mealy-mouthed, fence sitters, status quo warriors, what have you, wishy-washy. Yeah, and I just think that centrism has a bad rap here on YouTube, especially because it's getting slightly misrepresented. I'm not going to say totally misrepresented, but it's getting a bad rap from people who are not differentiating it from triangulation, the Clinton era triangulation, or post-Reagan era triangulation. And I just wanted to quickly note the difference between, say, like a radical centrist and the triangulation tactic that Bill Clinton used in the 90s to become president. First of all, I don't know of any people that would call themselves triangulated centrists. That's a tactic that politicians use. So to be clear, if you're a voter and you're a moderate, you're not a triangulated centrist. And what is triangulated centrism? Basically what it is, when you have the Overton window, and let's say that it's moving along as, society moves forward, and it's, and recently after Ronald Reagan, it's been shifting to the right noticeably. What Bill Clinton said is, we'll take this Overton window and we'll find the center of that window, and we'll try to get as many voters as we can from both sides. And it was an effective way for him to become president. It worked for him. But at the same time, because we were already so shifted to the right, the Overton window was so shifted to the right at that point already, he wasn't necessarily on the left by any means. And that's why people have a bad, that's why centrism has a bad connotation. Most centrists that you'll meet on the street are actually radical centrists. And that doesn't mean that they're radical in any way. Actually, just a side note, I can't stand when people call non-radical ideas radical or militant. It just gets on my nerves. You're a militant atheist. Yeah, that's not a thing. You're not a militant atheist because you're not trying to kill people over your beliefs, and we shouldn't, mince those words. But I digress. So a centrist is, well, let me tell you what it is to me. And then later I'm planning on making a video where I go over the different kinds of variables that go into the different forms of centrism, etc. But if you meet someone and they claim to be a centrist, generally speaking, what they're talking about is radical centrism. And to me, what that means is, let's break it down in a couple different parts. The first part is, I don't like the dialectic between right and left. I think that that's dumb because it means different things to different people and different parts of the world. It's just not, it's not very tangible. People know it when they see it, but it's really hard to put your damn finger on what exactly the left and the right mean. And think about how the fact that we call it left and right, when every single other thing you could think of, like ideologies, they have a ist to them or an ism to it. It's like a word that means something, and then ism, atheism. It's lack of belief in God. But when you're talking about right or rightism, it's inherently clunky. It's not without it merit at all as a way to identify somebody, but I think it's clunky. And here's an example of that. Just recently, Ben Shapiro was doing an interview on the BBC, and I'm sure you've seen this. Ben Shapiro gets kind of heated with the interviewer, and near the end of it, Ben Shapiro calls the interviewer a leftist, which I found hilarious because the interviewer is not on the left. He's a conservative by any right. And I'm not too familiar with the BBC, but I do listen to NPR every now and then, and I do think that they do kind of lean left, left of center. But it just goes to show you what I mean by these labels. The left and the right are just clunky. It's not that they're completely without merit as a way to describe somebody, but they're clunky. The lines are not well defined, and I think it's more of a distraction than anything. You'll see people arguing over semantic bullshit, and they never get to a fucking point because they're just constantly caught up in the word games associated with what it means to be on the left, what it means to be on the right, and it gets tired. I refuse to play that game. I would rather talk about issues. That's that as far as that's concerned. What else? Centrists are pragmatic. They're willing to compromise, but radical centrists are not willing to compromise their values. That's a mistake. Don't believe that all centrists are just willy-nilly going to give up their values, for the sake of pragmatism. That's triangulated centrism. That's what Bill Clinton did. He had no values because wherever the Overton window went, he went with it. And that's how he, triangulated the vote. I like to say that during the 2016 election, the primaries and the Democratic primaries, if you imagine Hillary on a train that's going to the right, and while it's going to the right, Hillary's running on top of the train to the left, she's posturing as if she's on the left. She's everything about her body movement, like the way she acts, it's all on the left while she's going towards the right. And that's, one of the problems I had with Hillary Clinton. And that's what a triangulated centrist is. I mean, Hillary was so bad about it. Obama even did it. The whole coming out in favor of gay marriage, as soon as it went over 50% of the country was in favor of gay marriage, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They had no actual tangible values. They just went where the Overton window went in order to get votes. And that sucks. But no, centrism is about, how do I put it? It's about creativity in the way that you compromise. Finding new ways to compromise so that you don't have to give up your values in order to work with somebody. Work with the other team, or work with, whoever you're working with. Compromising, using creative and new ideas, and making sure that you're using those the ideas that you have are based on facts and the scientific method, or historical precedent, and instead of being an ideologue. So there's a certain amount of pragmatism there. And with that creativity comes a certain side of centrism that I think you see a lot of in Andrew Yang, which is like a futurist. There's a certain air of futurism with centrism, at least for me. And what I mean by that is that Andrew Yang is warning everybody about the problems associated with artificial intelligence and robots taking everybody's jobs. And these are some serious issues that we're going to have to be equipped to deal with, and they're coming faster than you think. And if we're not equipped to deal with them, we're going to be stuck years behind. We're not going to be competitive in the global marketplace. So being prepared for the future and having unique ideas to prepare ourselves for the future when both sides are somewhat in a stalemate because they can't get anywhere, that's what I think of when I think of centrism. What else? We're pretty race neutral, I would say. Many centrists I meet, we're not on the SJW side. Sorry guys, but we're not necessarily on the anti-SJW side either. I find both of them pretty. I think that all of them are distracted. All of them are missing the point. So as far as like affirmative action is concerned, I don't mind stuff like that, but I would prefer it to be race neutral. So it was no matter what your race, if you grew up in a bad neighborhood, if we're going to give those kids an extra, a little bit of help, that's what I like more than, say, race-based affirmative action. Either way, that's not a big issue to me. But what else can I think of? Oh yeah, a centrist likes jobs. At least as far as I'm concerned, I like competition in the markets. I believe in fierce competition. The government should act in a way that maximizes competition as much as possible. So I'm in favor of breaking up big companies, in favor of competition. Competition is what drives the market forward. It's why capitalism works. And if you get rid of the competition angle in favor of these giant corporations and their mergers and monopolizing the markets and all of these things that stifle competition, and that's not good. And that actually leads me to my next point about centrism, or as far as what it means for me to be a centrist. And that's, when left to their logical conclusions, unbridled capitalism and unbridled tyrannical government power basically lead down the same path. They're both capable of tyranny, and they both will dominate your lives if left unchecked. And that humanity is constantly trying to consolidate power, almost the same way gravity works. The same way in a forest canopy, the top trees will absorb 90% of the light, and then the last 10% of that light will, go down to the underbrush, and 90% of the living organisms in that forest or jungle will, they'll be fighting amongst themselves for that last 10% of the light. It just seems like a rule of nature that, power accumulates to the very top. And it doesn't matter if it's government power. It doesn't matter if it's corporate power. These are forces, part of the human condition, that we have to be wary of and have to be careful of. And I believe that centrism, along with a well-educated populace, is so far the best idea that I could think of as far as a way to check and balance these two competing forces. Another thing about human nature is very true is our predisposition to get into these us versus them tribalistic fights. And you see this all over the place nowadays. People will get into their tribe and they will lock in. And there's no way they're getting out of that tribe. There's no way they're going to go. They don't even want to pop their own bubble. And I think a part of the reason why I'm a centrist is just to acknowledge that fact about human nature, and to be ready to fight against falling into these us versus them traps when I can. And I know that I'm not a perfect person, and I know that technically centrism is its own camp, but to me it's just a statement against getting into camps, getting into this us versus them mentality as far as politics is concerned, so much that we might undermine our values, for the sake of our party, for the sake of our clan. Especially, like I said earlier, the left and the right are not the most well-defined lines in the sand, if you will. So when it's all blurry and we're all being tribalistic and it's just this cacophony of confusion before we could even get anything really done. And I do know that this is human nature, and it's not something that you could really fight against, because human nature will just find a way to grow around it, the same way grass finds its way to grow through cement, out in the pavement. I'm not naive enough to think that if everybody was a centrist, we wouldn't have any tribal mentalities. No, but that's about it. If I could think of anything later, I will. That I'm going to be making a video later about the different kinds of centrism, basically a more detailed version of this, except not just talking about myself, but the other kinds of centrism that you might find in other parts of the world. Kind of like, the third way, and my opinions on that. Thank you for listening, watching. Centrist Offensive signing out. Thank you. Bye.